to what we're going to be talking about today. In 1980, Lella has termed the phrase the emergence of style. We'll focus on her thesis at Smith College at Fort Hill, which we're in Northampton right now, near her home, which is about a mile from where the center is located. We're going to examine Lella's theory in a 2021 context, and then very much this today is about exploring the relevance of the theory, the implications of the theory, so we're going to, what we're going to take you through now is a series of the hypothesis, and we're going to ask, we're going to have two things right now that we're going to talk about. One is the studio prompt, and then also the community norms, because until 11 o'clock, essentially what we want to do is to be able to, we're going to ask the participants, for everyone, to just listen to the presentation and to work in studio. And that's why I sent out the mural ahead of time, and maybe we'll just do a little bit of housekeeping here before we move on. Does everyone see the mural right now? So we set up this mural. This is a tool called Mural. It's basically a collaborative whiteboard that allows you to be making and communicating in sync together while we are presenting the slides and talking about the theories. And Lella has offered us in the mural a provocation that we want to talk about. And we want to invite all of you to think about in your own context. Lella, do you want to talk what remains in memory? This is your question.
Yes, what remains as memory is really in consideration of visual memory, something, an image that is inside yourself and tells about an event or experience that really has marked you positively, or has given to you the possibility to remain in your mind also visually. So is it possible that one can translate in an image something that is a memory? So even sound could be translated into an image, or
a feeling, or
yes, and also the really taste of something very good, or the aroma that one has been able to remember. It doesn't have to be only a visual memory, but it can be always translated into a visual memory, in my view. So that is a difficult invitation, I know, but I really a provocation to really make your memory into an image, or possibly a visual image in your mind.
So we invite everyone in the mural, or if you want to work on just on plain paper, also, like however you feel most comfortable, we'd like you to create a kind of schematic. It doesn't have to follow along this design, but it's kind of like a timeline, a lifespan timeline of looking at, we're all adults, so we're imagining what sounds you find beautiful and useful, which is the definition of design that we're going to use today. Beautiful things that you find beautiful and useful now in adulthood, and recalling your 3-year-old self, because we're going to be reflecting on Lella's research of 3-year-olds and thinking about the adult's role in documenting memory, and a visible memory, and we'll talk more about that. And then thinking about what are the influences along the way, what has cultivated those memories that are impactful.
And it could also be an image, but also a word or a mark or something that has very strong in your mind and can be communicated through words or through a mark or through a design. Yes.
Well, and just a thought here is that in the effort of creating documentation, right, funneling these sense perceptions into something that is visual, even if initially they are not visual, right? Some of these are such emotional, just physiological responses, but by translating those into a visual medium, one, that translation contextualizes it for those students, for those children. And two, it gives us something to work with in documentation, right? Now we can put this into a format that allows us to share it with other teachers, with the students themselves, with the parents, right? We're reinterpreting it in that way. Lella never mentioned in this way she just did, we've talked about this a lot, but that sort of, I saw it as a funnel, this funnel of all these different stimulus into the visual.
Absolutely.
So this provocation, Leila's provocation, is in the mural for you to refer to. You also might want to take a picture of it or jot it down in your notebook just to have as a scaffold for your thinking today. We also invite, if you're working in mural, we invite you to make your own studio. So you'll notice in the navigation on the left, there's an opportunity to create your own space where you can put material. And we invite you to put as much material as you like in there that you're willing to share with the group. I also, in my mural, I have a small, like a bio, just so that to introduce, because we're also going to do introductions in here. If you'd like to share your, we're not going to have a time to really go around and explain, meet each other individually. But if you'd like to do that, you can add that space. And also, I know, Leila, you like this very much. This is an information designer, Manuel Lima, who I really love. And just also to make the point that when you're documenting your experiences of what remains a memory from adulthood to your 3-year-old self and thinking about that trajectory, it doesn't have to be a linear or a line. It could be, there are different ways to plot that network, whether that be a radial or a line, but this is just his work, and I highly recommend looking at Manuel Lima's work. Is incredible from an information design perspective, and it really talks about how we're framing the emergence of style is within a design construct. So we'll talk more about that. So it's less about maybe more artistic, or I think that Leila's theories are very much in alignment with what I understand in my practice of graphic design. So we'll talk about that further, but really the mural is an open invitation. It's not required today, but we just thought we would experiment with the mural to see if it's something that you can, a provocation. So yeah. Is everyone who wants to be in the mural, because I can just spend a few minutes adding some more names into the mural? Or Marianne, I don't know if you can put the link in again, but maybe that way
I can
get in. Is anybody?
It's asking me for a mural code. Do you have a code to enter?
I don't have any code. I talked to customer service and they said all I had to do was share the link and everyone should be able to get in. So
so if you make an account, it'll let you in. You'll see so if you, I'm sorry about that, but that did work for me. I used an account I had. It was very quick. So
okay, I did create an account, but it was still asking for a code. It's okay. I'll try again.
Try that link again that I just put in there, Heather.
Yeah. And I would private message Marianne if you have any trouble, and then I can also keep an eye on that as well. But okay, but we thought it would be nice during the presentation for you all to be in the mural if you'd like to be, and you can. I say with my students, this is like a perfect fidget toy because when you're working with students and they kind of want to listen to your lecture, but they want to fidget too. So this gives you a chance to fidget while you're working. So, and it's permissible in the studio, so it's okay, don't worry. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the slides. So we're going to show you about 60 slides of just provocation of mainly Leila's really prehistories of like some work that some of you may not know about. If you have been following Leila's work.
I was just born.
So, but if it's okay, I'm going to not be in presentation mode. I'm going to be in this mode. So, so hopefully you can see this on your screen. Okay. All right. So we're going to be, so we're going to talk about the hypothesis. We'll take a little bit of a break at 10:30. So we're basically going to talk until about 10:30, 10:40. We're going to ask that you not ask questions or we don't talk openly during the presentation, but you can feel free to like talk in the mural. If you have questions, that's a place to park your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can.
Yeah.
But we can follow up after today too as well if you need, we can have further discussion after today's mini course as well. And then we'll take a little break, and then 11 o'clock will really be a chance for us to look back at the mural. We'll be able to, you can share things that you've been drawing on paper or, you know, of Lella's provocation, so we can move forward there. Does that sound okay to everyone? And we're going to end promptly at noon, so to respect everyone's time, we'll be finished at noon. So we talked about this. So this is the provocation. Everyone has this. If you don't have it, I might take a screenshot or take a picture now. So you just make sure you have this throughout the presentation. Again, as I said, it's not, you don't have to follow this design, this structure, but if it's helpful, then you can do that. The emergence of style is really rooted in 3-year-olds. A study of 3-year-olds. So that's partly why we've set this up this way.
How would you call the tendency that many of us have to doodle, to make marks on paper when one is in a very boring lecture? And how do you call that?
How do we?
Scribbles?
Yeah, scribbles, doodles.
Doodles, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are many words for it.
There
Yes, yes.
And the words correspond to the marks or the invention of the author. I don't know.
Yeah.
One is very capable of pretending to be very attentive and mark something that is very elaborate,
Yeah.
or somebody else is covering the hand that is making the mark on the paper. Somebody else tries to copy what James is doing because he's so much better. So maybe there could be for us the possibility to see what all of you are doing in doodling.
Yeah.
So that would be doodling in introduction.
Right. Or if you're my 14-year-old son, you would have your cell phone underneath the table while you're in school, right?
Can you make drawings with a finger on the telephone?
Yes, these
Yeah,
days,
there's so many
actually,
ways to
Why
make.
don't you try to do one for me today?
We will, maybe during the break.
James has his whiteboard over here. So yeah, so James has set us up too, by the way. We're in this home studio, but James has set up lights. So that's why we're so well lit here. So,
I would
Okay.
like that.
All right. So the emergence of style hypothesis, Leila, you call it I mean, it's still a hypothesis. We don't know if it's a theory.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet.
No. For the theory, we would need a little more participation of ideas or questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that we are glad to take, and there is somebody who can note them down.
So this is primarily what we're talking about today is Leila's hypothesis, and we're looking for your feelings about the relevance of this today. This was developed in 1980. But prior to talking about the emergence of style, we're going to go back to some prehistory to share with you some of Leila's prehistory that some of you, I mean, as I said, who have been following Leila's work maybe don't know so much about. This is some beautiful prehistory. From 1971. There's an article that I had sent out ahead of time called, can you say the after school, say the name?
San Cipriano. San Cipriano is the name of a village, not a poetic village, but a small group of houses that has also enough children and families to lead a preschool, but also an elementary school, and where I taught to children in the school, because the director of the school was very interested in the creativity of children who are in a depressed area, economic area, and how that creativity can be supported by giving the children the tools and the time and the thought to develop their ability to draw and create with tools that usually in regular schools are available, but in that school were very scarce. So I helped with my group of teachers. Also, there were various artists with me who came, and we would support the research that the children were very shyly at the beginning making about the marks and drawings they were doing, and then slowly giving them tools and material to construct something more satisfactory, especially for them, but very much for us as we were the tentative teachers. So that was something that created a great deal of our attention also in the city of Naples. It was presented later, really at the university also, where I was getting my doctorate in education.
So the context is, this is Lella in 1971 living in Naples, just north, right, of Naples in San Cipriano. And
yes, the place where I went to work with my group of teachers was, I had to drive from the city of Naples to Latina, and it was in the between them, and was a very depressed area in terms of economy, but there was a very liberal director of the school who was really invited me and a group of people who were very interested in exploring the possibility that one could give to children and let them bloom really
in the after school, with a very supportive director, and you were working with these are adolescents, right? Ages like 10 to 14, 16.
Yes, no, more to 10 to 12.
10 to 12 year olds. Yeah. And so we don't have much documentation from this particular period to show you images of the actual space, but it just every time, Lella, you talk about this time, just sounds so magical. You working in studio after school with 10 to 12-year-olds, and some of the children had been gone to multiple schools, going to school during the day in Naples and going to your studio after school. And you were also collaborating with performance artists and actors. And,
it became very interesting for people who were curious about the creativity of children, and had really knew how difficult it was, the life of those children, to come and help with offering them possibility, for example, to work with clay, bring some clay, or new material to explore. Right.
So we're going to pause on this beautiful quote. This is from the article to really, this is the early stirrings, I think, of this emergence of style, this idea of that Lella invited people to, or the children to explore. So we're just going to spend a moment. And Lella, would you like to read This
with
part?
my accent. Okay. During the first day in my art workshop one, I made available paper, paint, and crayons to be used freely. This had never happened before in their school life. I pinned continuous rolls of paper around the wall, inviting the children to draw or paint or make collage, all the while encouraging them to do these collectively. This was strange and new for them. Soon they were fervently enthusiastic about everything. Each new tool and material was literally attacked and absorbed and employed with intense noise and passionate attention. This was very new for these children because they were really had been controlled with just a little piece of paper to do very boring copy of Word.
And this was all done with a very supportive director. So you had
Yeah.
a leader in the school who was very
Yes,
supportive.
it was because there was a new director who was very attentive to creativity that was possible. It was legal to do, etc. So those children would not lose any credit for their schooling career.
And this is an image that was done in the print studio. Right? Can you talk about this?
Yes,
This one?
this is typical of when we ask to a question, what remains in your mind as a memory? These are the depiction of the emigrant, the father that had to go to work abroad in order to provide enough income to support the children. So why all dressed in black? The idea was that to be properly clothed, you had to have everything neat. So it looks very sad, but it looks like the children would see their parents when they were to be properly dressed to go to work. That was the imagination of the children creating this uniform. So they were not only each child's father, but they were all the same problematic people who had to go away in order to find a job enough that gave enough income for the family. So it was really created by the children, but it was emblematic of the situation of difficulty and will to overcome the difficulty.
And really just it's emblematic of the context of being in the city, in a very dense city and an urban,
yeah. The children, once they were given the ability to work with papier-mâché, with paint, with materials, really started to bloom and create a story, not only a written story, but characters for stories. And this in particular, they were very proud of. It was a person that was telling story each for one story for each child. So the child would use the puppet to tell about himself or herself. These are elementary school children, right? They were not preschool. They were more children who were on the third grade or fourth grade. So they really had the ability to write well, and of course with lots of mistakes, but because of the dialect that was spoken in the area. But they really could express their thoughts in writing, but also they started to enjoy the idea of expressing themselves through puppets that could be their own self, but could tell the truth.
And several of the children had been to many schools before they came to the school,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
they had been,
More than many schools, they was had to work more and lose the year of school, and therefore they to recover the year that they had lost. And
okay, so we're going, oh, and you can see a little bit of the building. So it's nice, in this image, we can see a little bit of the context of the school, from the balcony of kind of the, like what this context looked like. So you
Yeah.
can get a little picture of that.
it was these buildings had, instead of having the roof, tended to have a terrace on the top floor, so that the expense of the tiles was eliminated. But and the space, for example, during the summer was used to dry tomatoes or to dry vegetables that we then use during the winter, because agriculture was the only support of this area of the south of Italy.
So after this period, after you worked in the after school, you were encouraged to open a studio in your apartment in Naples, right?
Yes.
And you produced 2 books, one in Italian is Fa di Te, but
Yes.
there's an English version that's called Make It with Paper and Things, that
Yes.
was an outgrowth really of this period in Naples.
Yeah, because Te was very difficult to translate. So make it yourself seems to imply something bad. So we could not use translate directly. But make it with paper and things was very direct, concrete, and therefore the book really was accepted by the publisher happily, fortunately.
So we're going to show a series of images from this book, starting with this one.
So here was the development of printing with vegetables. So really use the tool of printing, but not creating a paper or cloth mark, but use natural things, because the inside of vegetables is wonderful, has a wonderful design, and the children very happily like to explore those designs that were coming from, even a coin was used, but it was very 50 cents coin. It was not very expensive.
And elements from the home, so
Yeah.
children could see that you could use these basic materials
Basic
from the home
materials, yeah.
to make marks, right?
Yeah.
And design. And James, if you want to reflect on anything, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
You're going
I
to talk
think a
about the
little bit
home
later,
studio in
yeah.
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, another material that was fantastically easy to recuperate and use was papier mâché, so that newspaper could be available without the used one, and also we could really build with the children material that then could be, once dried, could be painted and really take completely personal color or design.
But also used it with the design as well.
All right, yeah.
And just to reflect the utility of, I mean, the practicality of all of these artistic endeavors, how firmly rooted it is in these children's everyday experience, makes it so accessible and so rewarding. I mean, as a kid, right, you make a bowl. This is like the bowl you use at home. You just made this. Now you've customized the ownership there through school and directly connecting to their home life. I mean, those links become so much stronger. And again, through documentation, sharing this with the parents, you're creating this organism that exists beyond just the school. where everyone is integrated and in cahoots, right? They're all having fun and on a plan. So,
And then at the very end of the school year, all this could be survive, so they could survive, was exhibited for the parents. And the parents were at first puzzled by this style of teaching and learning, but slowly became very, very appreciative because they saw, first of all, the children completely really happy and really with a goal about learning, but also because they felt like authors. The children were authors of something that was appreciated by everybody. It was done together, and it was really something that could be used in another way. So that was unusual.
one thought here too is that the political and cultural context of the time is essential here, right?
Yeah.
We're post-fascism. This isn't big marble buildings anymore and smart clothes.
Yeah.
This is much more personal. This is much more intimate and human. Glorification of what is it to be a worker? What is it? I mean, how much more perfect does it get here? This immigrant population moving around, right? So efficient and bare bones, drying things on the roof of the school that they're teaching at. I mean, it's it's so integrated into the community and needs to be viewed as such, needs to be treated as such, right? To bring everyone in. So part of it is what she did, right? But part of it, as always with Lella, is the response to the situation she walked into, right? You had a million choices you could, I mean, not a million, but you had different choices.
Yeah.
But to put them at the forefront and what the needs of that community was, saved her a whole lot of energy and made it much more effective.
And it was not, I was not alone because it was a group of us from Naples with same willing and intentional work. One was a musician, one was a painter. So they had all artistic gifts, and they could contribute to the children. And the children were very aware of that, while the previous teachers would simply correct their mistake in grammar and punish them slightly, not physically, but with bad grades when they were making mistakes in grammar. Then we were encouraging them to learn to express themselves correctly in Italian, of course, and also introducing things that they had sorted out and that they had shaped, even putting together, recyclable tools, recyclable containers could make a fantastic magic dream of a wall. And once it was photographed. And one of the people who worked with me was a photographer who really was guiding the children in taking photographs and also in really creating construction that could really mean something strong for them with recycled material.
But I think you mentioned that this was thought of as a space station by the students.
Yeah.
Right. Which that's fascinating.
Yeah, they are creating a feeling.
Yeah, recycled material space. These children are experts on these materials. They use them every day. A bowl, expert. You've used it. You go into a tool that you've never used, learn to do this art. Yeah, you're a beginner, but here you have something to work with, to start with.
It becomes a grammar, I mean, of a kind of vocabulary in the home and in the environment.
And better confidence to begin with, you can enter.
And then think how now we are aware about the waste of things that are thrown away. And even then there was the idea that things can be recycled and be meaningful in a meaningful way. This is a drawing, a geometric drawing that was really representing something that they wanted to create, a sort of flag of their place with the colors, etc. And they worked very diligently with
Construction paper, you said?
tools and construction paper, and to create the color, the design, and what they wanted hopefully to make a flag of some kind for their school. And we never really completed the flag because we didn't find the material, the cloth that could have the same colors, but it was a design that they really were very proud of.
And rooted in identity, right? You're creating again, you're creating something that is about you. You're at the center. This is our community. This is our world. It feels very medieval in some ways. But especially in Italy, I'm thinking about an immigrant population, all in transition. Probably some of these kids have not been here that long. To create that, to say, let's create a sense of culture and identity here, and use it as a learning tool.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes this would be the memory or a procession that might go through the village once, because it is so complex. And so their memory has tried to reconstruct something that they like.
The simple paper, which is what, you know, from my own experience in the design studios, just that was always amazing, is just how little material you need to construct a design, to make something new. And I read this as a map, or heraldry, or
a flag,
or community of urban plan.
So one thing that the children loved was also the discovery that their hands, while they were doing their marks with black ink, could become something else. And then that was some kind of enthusiasm of transforming everyone's hand into animals or people. So this is just a little window, but of course the director of the school was not too pleased, because also the parents complained that the children would go home with this mark that were, but there was an ambivalence by the parents. They were very proud that the
What are you
children-
doing in the school?
and very proud that the children would do it. So this is also the negotiation and conversation with the principal of the school, who had really the real supporter of the school, and the parents that were hoping the children would become ready to get a job somewhere. So there was a lot of negotiation and playing around with things, moment of celebration, moment of questioning, and therefore in a sense, all of this would support the dialogue, which was usually in that period not at all existing between parents and children and teachers. So that was also another very important steps that came about. Yeah. To use clay and papier mache to make mask was the culmination of one of the aspects of the school. And here I have my older son, who is not anymore like
Andre, this is
Andrea.
Andrea.
and one little friend, because also I had in that period open in my own home an atelier for children to paint and work with clay. So that was beyond the school. But in order for me to have to continue to explore and prepare a book about this, but also to really be able to really have enough income to continue to do things that I wanted to do, and using my apartment for visiting children and making an atelier.
Including your sons.
Yeah, yeah, Miss Andrea and this is a good friend of Andrea.
So nice.
Mm. I wonder if you have questions.
Yeah, I think we're asking folks to put those questions in the mural and then at 11
Okay.
we can come pick up. Is that okay?
Mm.
So we'll continue and then,
Yeah.
okay? Okay. So this is just another photograph. The photography is beautiful, and these are, you were working with a photographer who was
Fabio Donato.
taking these photographs for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that was very fortunate. The group of people who worked with me were all very gifted. They're either, even if not officially recognized as painters and photographers, but for example, Fabio Donato was a professional photographer who was with us every time we went to San Cipriano, and that he documented this, and we of course have the book that has been published, and we'll show it to you, but in any case, it is a book that was published in Italy, and it was really a group project. It was, I could not have done this kind of research and reflection and continuous adjustment of the various experiences, visual experience, without the group support. So now you see us together. Why it is so, it is, for me, it is the best way of being in a dialogue. And I hope that you have some questions to offer us, because
Reflections.
yeah, or reflection, because we are all together, and I would really like to hear either question or observation about what, not to compliment what I said, but to add something to it.
Well, I think we can also, Leila, we can also look at the mural. I don't know if folks have been going into the mural, but we could
Yeah.
also. Yeah. And so we encourage, if there are questions or implications or things that you feel open to add to this as well. So
Yeah.
if you want to add to the spaces. So I see
Yeah.
Kay, you've added, so we can see Kay's studio. So yeah, so, and I know it's hard sometimes to listen and to produce, but that's also in the spirit of the home studio, the idea that there can be notes. And these are, so this in here, I think you can see these are James notes from our conversations. Some of the notes, but yeah, I think it's better. Maybe we go through the Emergence of Style. We can talk about Fort Hill, Leila. And so there's one more image from the book, which I think is one of my favorites.
It's like either temps or samosas.
One more image from Fa di Te, from your book.
Yeah, which is the milk containers.
Yeah, just the economy of means.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're going to switch to 1980. So at this point, Leila's moved to the States. So we're changing geography to the United States. And you started your master's study at Smith College and did your research in the at Fort Hill, which was the lab school at Smith College.
Yeah.
It was established in 1926 for graduate study. We're just going to give you some context. Let me go here first. The lab school at Smith for early childhood was in an old mansion that was actually owned by the mill owner previously in the late 1800s for the silk industries in Western Massachusetts. His name is Samuel Whitmarsh. And so what you see here are images from like the early 1900s before it became the lab school. And just very interesting history that we won't go into detail, but I highly recommend that you look at the history of this. But this was the context in which you did your master's study, using the spaces in this house. And I put this arrow here because I think the entrance for the lab school was in the back.
Yeah.
It's got many porches and like many of the architecture in Northampton has these like little nooks and crannies in these houses. And also a picture here of a very interesting also part of the history was that during the abolitionist period in Western Massachusetts, there Sojourner Truth, who was a leader during that time, had been set up a utopian society for industry and education in the silk industry. And so there's an enormous history here and part of the establishment of higher education and this notion of research and academia. And so what we're going to show you now is very different, I think, than your time in Naples. It's more in an academic context. And I think that the general piece here that we want to like pay attention to as a strand is Leila's beautiful carving of space for children and this notion of visible listening. What does it mean to visibly listen to children? I think that you'd already been doing in Naples, but did in a more formalized way for your master's thesis. So.
Yes, and also I was very, very grateful to have the possibility to use that space. It was a real gift, and I felt that it was for the children, but also for my own possibility to listen to them and give them space.
Mm-hmm. So we don't have a lot of photo documentation from this period, but it's my understanding that in the lab school that the rooms in this house were established classrooms, like lab classrooms, but that Leila, you found spaces in the house that were alternative spaces. So like hallways or
to have walls that could be used to put paper and let the children really make the movement very easy, and also very good windows with light. So it was very fortunate that I was allowed to really use this space.
So you had a series of easels that were like kind of old, like a lot of them not new, but they were like wood and easels that were.
Yeah, we constructed the easels because the easels allowed for the children to really approach with paper at their own time. So that was something I can recommend really warmly, to create easels for children to want to explore drawing, and they are really not too tall, so that they have their own space, visual space, movement space, and a sense of ownership of the drawing that they do, not to keep forever, but just to while they are drawing. So
we want you to imagine Leila constructing spaces in this house for her graduate study, setting up easels for 3-and-a-half-year-old children with big pieces of paper, so almost the size of their physical proportion. And then children would come in the morning and be able to work with, not so much work with you, but you were really more of an
choice.
observant.
Yeah.
Observant.
And they didn't have to come. These
Yeah.
children, it was an optional,
Yeah,
it was an optional activity.
Yeah.
So it was all by choice if the children decided to come and engage this.
yeah.
Um,
And the parents were so grateful. Also, and the children behaved. There was sometimes from parent question, do the children
Yeah.
behave? There was absolutely, they wanted to be there. They wanted to pay. So it was their choice.
So we're showing you a slide here of, this is Leila's development of a chart that that helped to structure the observation or this visible listening. And the main children that were she observed during this period. So you can see, I just want to break down this design of this structure that, so the age of the child is here. So primarily all the similar ages.
Yeah, and so they were 3 and 3.5, and they were more older. They were no 5-year-old. So it was really unusual for parents to find a place where to send their children so young and feeling that they were safe, happy, and really very engaged. It's really unusual. And I was myself surprised when I organized that would work so really respectful for the children's desire to express themselves.
So this was an open exploration on white paper. Every morning could come in. There was no lesson. There was no specific provocation. It was an open drawing.
Mhm.
And you collected and you observed, and then we're going to show you the process of analysis, or I don't know how construction of how you produce this, but essentially was tracking over time
Following them,
their growth over time.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting, and actually Kathy Topal, who's not here, but was the art teacher during this time in Fort Hill. Some of you may know Kathy. She collaborated with Leila on beautiful stuff and different projects in this research. But this, what Kathy pointed out that I didn't even see for a long time is that the way that Leila, you did this is you broke up the drawings that children did at home or did at school in Fort Hill, but also collected from the parents. Drawings from home.
Because the parents were totally surprised that the children were so intent in doing when they came to pick them up, so intent to work seriously that they asked, could we continue at home? So I provided with a little structure just to realize that the children had a very creative sense, and no matter where they were, so they wanted to do. They really not every day. You see Calvin here decided basta, okay, that's enough, or something like that. I don't remember for sure, but that was a documentation that the parents were very surprising for them to have somebody who would collect day by day the work of the children.
So this begins the emergence of style, and this is what we want to talk about. 11 is sort of the implications of this this tool, this Leila's method for visibly listening, to what implications this has in terms of really listening as a teacher or observer or researcher to really, or parent or anyone who works with young children to really listen.
Definitely the desire to observe comes from the reggio emilia approach that I learned from Loris Malaguzzi in Italy. So that was a basis of learning that has been really very strong for me. The attention and the possibility to capture with photographs or with sketches what the children were doing.
So we're going to take you through each child's, some of the materials. These are direct pages from Lella's thesis, 1980 for each child. So you can see the collection process and the observations. So these are the paintings on the easel, each individual child. And then what's remarkable here is the process of documentation that allowed for you to trace those
strokes of the children. I try to see what I wonder if there was a sequence that was particular for each child or not. It did not really change much what I saw, but I was trying to really become more analytical of what the children were doing. But after all, it was not so useful. Was really, even if I knew that there was a sequence of certain kind, it didn't really change so much the final sense of pleasure. Or I think that what changed was that the children felt observed with great care, and therefore they realized that what they were doing was really important for me, for the teacher, and also for the parents who came to see afterwards.
Yeah, so these are endlessly fascinating. I think we've looked at these and for many, many hours, just sort of breathtaking, always something new to discover here. But it's almost just how you freeze in time, even though this was done in 1980, there's some way in which this is still so fresh. And to think about, and this is what we'd like you to think about, is like, what does it mean for an adult to pay that much attention to an individual child, to give? And I think that here, this feature of the time, 5 minutes of concentrated looking and observation to really delve into that individual child's mark making. And it almost becomes cinematic. I think of your work in video and sound, James, of like, it freezes that moment in time, but just such a beautiful artifact of, and what implications this has today, thinking about.
Also the idea that the child, toward the end, returned on the marks that she had done and filled in the spaces that felt were not filled enough. So it was the behavior of a painter that looks at the work of art.
One thought here is the specificity of it, right? 5-minute time scale, 5-minute time period to observe. But then it's not just that, it's the going back and forth too.
Yeah.
We couldn't make these. I mean, look, if I looked at Julie, let's look at Devin's work, right? If I see one of those images, that's fine. That's absolutely interesting, helpful. But to see them all next to each other like that, to see these longer term themes that these children are working with and exploring, to see the intelligence that alone you don't see. But now in context, there's this deep exploration that this child is doing. Yeah. Or even you see the home life. How does that relate? So Lella's choice to observe different time scales is fascinating. But also the caveat is, as a teacher, as an educator, you're possibly alone doing a lot of stuff, right? So the choice of what you want to document is key. That's a big decision, because you do not have time to manage crowds, attend to individual needs, and also get everything you want, right? You have to choose. And Lella chose, and what she chose, we're still talking about, right? We're drawing observations and analysis out of that. So this is just another example of why documentation, when done separating observation and analysis, gives you so much to work with. even in the future, 20 years later, right?
And at the same time, as the children felt they were observed, they were very meticulous about what they were doing. So therefore, the observation of the teacher was, which was I, the teacher, was really encouraging them to keep going. You know, instead of doing 3 brushes and go. So
Absolutely.
here,
Sticking
they
with it,
feeling
sticking with it.
everything. And I was really also putting the number because I like very much when a child went back to a particular space to fill in more color. So what it is almost like a painter, very sophisticated, that is looking at his painting and say, I need to, you know.
Absolutely.
I think you when I first asked you about the emergence of style, you said that you felt, I'm trying to remember exactly what you said, but you said that you felt that adults needed to give that kind of prominence to a young child, like to a painter, that a painter has established style, but the recognition that young children, even at the age of, you know, as early as 3, have a style and know when they're finished, right?
Yeah.
So your the respect in which you give to children, and oftentimes I think in art and design education, which is like, you know, it's sort of like children aren't capable of having a style. They're not capable of, you know, having that kind of those kinds of ideas. But I think that's what really this emergence of style really gives that prominence to a child's vision and ideas.
Respect without pressure, right? You're giving them a lot of respect, but you're also not saying, you're taking their work seriously,
Right.
but you're not pressuring them. So often when they're taken seriously, it's also with a prescriptive approach. Oh, no, that line should be there. This, no, we're taking it. So that
You
is a
didn't tell them
different,
what to do. You
it's such a
didn't-
different energy. Yeah.
you they told you when they were finished.
Yeah,
They
all
said.
done, yeah.
They would say all done. Layla's sitting in the background. They knew you were looking, but
And this is an essential part of it, right? Lella is there. She's present, right? It's not that she's invisible,
No.
but so she's occupying space, but she's not controlling space, right?
So we'll just look at a few more case.
Very particular style of Margaret was here to make an outline and then fill in. That was her style, and it seemed to sometimes you see I found this much more interesting, but I never stopped her to advise or suggest, because she knew what she wanted to do.
I guess this was a donation, Kathy said this was a donation from a paper company, gave a bunch of these circles.
Yeah, that was very grateful to this type of gift, of course.
Margaret also started to draw a lot of people, and
yes, this the hypothesis of the parent was that there was a child in a rhyme,
a sibling coming.
Right.
And there's a fascination, there's an interesting segue into one, as part of our research meeting regularly to talk about this, we invited a number of weeks ago Layla's professor, Peter Pewfall, who lives in Northampton, to join us. And he shared with us, and I can share the sources for everybody, but he also was, he wrote about Layla's theories in an article, and it was also investigating this work in parallel as her professor at the time. And so there's a very interesting analysis that comes from Peter's articles and work, and he was a professor at Smith for many years, and working in the lab school. So this is just there was a fascination, I think, about Margaret's work, and we're also through Kathy, whose daughter was actually in the classroom while she was there, is in touch with a lot of the parents So part of our research is to interview the parents and possibly the children who are now 42,
Yeah.
42, 43 years
Yeah.
old. So we're hoping we can go back with Leila's provocation of what remains as a memory and ask the parents and also the now adults.
I hope so.
Yeah, so these are just some artifacts, you know, from Leila's papers that have surfaced.
Right, her
some
notes at the time.
analysis.
Shameful bad handwriting.
No, your handwriting is very much your style, Leila.
Okay.
So, but these are just some comparisons. So I know that James, you've been obsessed with these marks from Devon here. Can you talk about?
I think Devon's are interesting. Absolutely. No, I just, it's what I said earlier. I think any of those taken out of context is fine, interesting, good job. But put in context, you just see again, something so different.
Yeah.
You see, she's trying to work out something. She's exploring it. The patience to observe makes such a difference. I'll talk a little more about that. I see conflict with my children. If I can close my mouth and wait and let them do what they're gonna do, they come up with so much more. It takes a long time for a 3.5-year-old to voice or to express what comes so quickly to us.
Right.
You know?
But what I think is interesting, and particularly in my field of graphic design, we talk about typographic color,
Right.
which is even in
Weight.
black and white, it has to do with the weight of something,
Yeah.
feeling a different cognitive, well, in psychology terms, cognitive shift of a different kind of motion.
Absolutely.
And these are all coming from large, just to keep in mind, these are reductions from large pieces of easel paper.
Another factor, which is we've talked about a lot, but is super key, right? Is as opposed to, well, the psychological aspect of sitting down at a desk with a paper in front of you, not really moving, drawing very small, fine things, versus standing in a room with a bunch of easels, other children also engaging this, someone new and exciting observing behind, and you can make broad stroke. Like, what a more interesting, stimulating environment, right?
On the wall.
On the wall.
Sometimes I had to stop a child who was so eager to correct the
next children.
design of the another child. Maybe
You would intervene.
feeling quietly and going and change and say, no, ask him if you want to be helped.
Right.
So,
Well, a thought about that is, right, by doing by doing this open-ended approach, you also run into management that you have to do what you might not have, right? Having to negotiate that. How do I come in and maybe affect and influence this without coming in too hard here, right? So it is challenging, but also creates an opportunity for you to connect with them, which you may not have had.
Well, we're going to come now. We're in Calvin's story, which I know is fascination for you, Leila.
just to continue to conclude the story.
So Calvin had a very different approach, which was a vocabulary, grammar of circles, and
he knew that he wanted to do the circles, but I had no idea or trying to guess when he thought he was finished. But then one time he also used some kind of script or almost script. But the sequence, I thought I needed to see how the sequence was from center to always the smaller circle was in the center, then he would go out, but he would also go out of the paper in a way. So that was something that he knew when he was finished. Absolutely.
This is so aligned with my education, my formal design education and graphic design, because when we learned to design posters, our instructors were always talking about the edge, the use of the edge and the tension of the edge. And I just can't get enough of that. That you recorded this within a 2-minute span. That feature, that critical feature of this particular design, you're just, the schematic here is just endlessly fascinating. Every time I look at this slide, I can't
8:50
get
to
enough.
8:52, and it was finished.
Yeah, and he was finished, and that's when he said, "I'm finished." Yeah. So just to think about that, think about the attention again with multiple children working, Layla in the back studying these drawings and doing these almost like animations, these cinematic tracings of the time is just a fascinating and just just to really appreciate the features of this this exploration is just remarkable. And then to see, yeah, as we said earlier, there's not much here. It's I think that Calvin may have been an international student, and that his
Yes, he was
parents were
Chinese.
possibly Chinese, and that we didn't have anything at home, but Kathy had mentioned that possibly his father was doing paintings with the children, came in and was I don't know if it was like a Sumi painting or something, but there was some influence there, I think, perhaps, from the family.
Yeah.
And then Rachel, some more, just so you can see the shift.
We felt that Rachel was much more adventurous with the colors and really paying attention to color with more than marks. So that was what
Very spontaneous. Yeah.
you see. She also tries to communicate feelings about what she was doing.
Yeah, it's really such a beautiful graphic expression here. Just
Yeah.
But it was interesting reading your professor's writings is just the analysis that goes on, I think, in I think Peter's work was primarily in psychology, to think about the different perspectives also that come in to this work, that to read the article, how he describes what you were doing, and then what you were doing, and then how we're interpreting. So there's a metaphor that I use in my teaching and talks about this sort of idea of the multiple perspectives. So I think it's very important that we as analysis or observers of this information is to make our own conclusions about what the emergence of style is really about in this,
It can be so many
many
different-
interpretations
Yeah.
about what this hypothesis really can mean and what implications it has in your individual context.
But certainly the joy of children to achieve something that they can leave traces of is very, very important. Even when there is very little that we can offer the children, to offer them paper and markers of
Right.
some kind, is giving them multiple languages to explore anyway.
Yeah, so that's the last slide of the Layla's theories. And now we're going to go a bit into, James is going to share some of your reflections as a parent and
Sure.
and the home studio, because your daughters are just, I think, going to school in the fall. So
yeah.
they've been at home, and you've been working with them at home. So do you want me to direct me and show me?
Sure. Let's
So-
actually, I just had a few thoughts that I wanted to bring in about Lella
Yes,
before
of course,
I
of
go into
course.
that. Which are just again from the psychological perspective of observing Lella in these environments. One thing that comes to mind is the American Western narrative of the outsider coming into a town, right? The town is the way it is. You are not part of that community. That community knows it very well. You have an opportunity to make a first impression. And how you make that first impression sort of defines, it's a chute or a ladder. And the unassuming, sorry to embarrass you, but the unassuming way that Lella enters almost any situation, whether it's early childhood, whether it's adults, is so disarming partly, right? It recontextualizes our whole experience. Like, wait a minute, I was expecting this was going to be what I know these things to be. And that disarming aspect changes things. Now, all of a sudden you have these students who are like, who's this person? She's not being prescriptive. She's not really intense. I don't quite know what And that space, I think, provides an enormous opportunity, but requires confidence and patience, right? And an ability to be present, which is not always easy, right? I want to say documentation helps this greatly. I think documentation is an unnatural muscle initially. To write, to the idea to turn that, it's much like journaling, anyone who started that. It's not, it's weird at first, but by doing it, it allows you to take the past and the future out of your brain and you just store it on the paper. Now you can be here, present, and respond to it. You know, the parallels between all of those, between San Cipriano, I even see the image of Malaguzzi's set up in the piazza at Reggio, right? With all the long banners and the students just, you know, seriously observing and drawing, and the parents watching there, right? You think of the San Cipriano, these circular pieces of paper all around the wall, and that sense of continuity, that importance that is now given to, and it's weird. Well, really? It's on the wall? We can just draw. You know, this is unusual. I'm giving you permission that you've never had, and I'm respecting you. I'm still here and present. This isn't a free for all. I'm very serious, but I'm here.
I'm researching.
I'm
yeah.
researching, and you are very interesting to me. So that context, over and over again, I see Lella enter environments, and it's not that you can't change that, but by coming in with such openness, I think you really invite something. And it happens with the parents as well, right? You send home these images. These parents do not have, many of them do not have degrees in early childhood education. They have lives and busy stuff and their own psychological baggage, right? But when you put them in a context like this, where there is a simple and easy way they can join this, we're in a community, we're in a group. This is the intelligence of that community is so powerful if you allow it to come out versus you trying to control and suss out everything. There is such intelligence in the group, and Lella allows that to flourish and nurtures
Trust.
When you want to plant plants, you don't feed the plant, you feed the soil, right? Lella feeds the soil, that community, that environment, and then the students do what they do naturally.
It's a system of trust. I think a lot of schools we don't trust the students to make their own decisions or be able to sit back. And I think that's one of the biggest implications for me, thinking about especially coming out of quarantine, going back to campus, going back to schools. My son's starting high school in the fall. I just, I think that, anyway, it gets into lots of questions about testing and about different things.
It does, but even in the home studio and COVID, right? This is it's such a complicated time for early childhood that we are only starting to understand the psychological implications of what it was like for the students, for the children in that age range. We have ideas, right? But to be home, to be in a very different social milieu. We have ideas, but we're only starting to uncover. And that's where something like this, the home studio and sort of some of these tenets that underpin it, I think can help us. Again, use that intelligence of the group to heal some of that, to bring everyone together.
So you transition?
Sure.
James, I know it's hard to talk about. I'm going to talk about my home studio too. So we'll kind of see where, but this is your home studio.
This is my home studio. I have two.
James, you want to come more into the screen?
Sure. I can come a little bit more. I have 2 3.5-year-old girls, Gemma and Aurelia, who having twins has been an exhausting and utterly fascinating experience. These two kids get to bounce, much like when children go to preschool and get to play act and share their experiences and work through. These children work through they experience almost everything together. And so they can triangulate every experience by each of them working back and forth together, working with us. So the perspective, it's almost like a 3-dimensional perspective I see that these kids get by being able to constantly work through it with each other. Almost every experience, whether it's a TV show they watch, whether it's something scary they both saw outside. So it's been fascinating to be part of that. And it's also been required surrender and patience that I did not realize I would have to have. Because one of the aspects that is fascinating is they learn from each other and how they interact with you. For example, if one of them challenges you and you don't do so well with that challenge, the other one takes notes, all right? So there's this aspect of, if it was one child, I'd be much more easily able to exert my adult parental will, right? But with two of them, it forces me often to step back.
Can I click?
Absolutely, yeah, you can
Okay.
complete. So this is, they're Gemma and Aurelia. I'm half Cameroonian, and so my mother brought them some wonderful dresses, which they enjoy thoroughly, and they're wearing there. A lot of painting, a lot of watercolor happens in the house, as well as they have an easel, and they use that very much. They both have their own styles in a sense, but often collaborate on the work very naturally. They like to complete each other's, I mean, it's sort of the cliches of twins, right? But they work together very well. You can keep going.
Yeah.
More examples. And one of the things, we can keep going. I think the next one might be the big, oh yes. One of the things that I've found is very rooting for them. And much like what Lella was just talking about is cooking, is everyday objects, right? They love and love and love to make real food and also to imitate and create their own versions of what we do. So it's been a great form of expression for them at home to be able to play with that, to organize, to recontextualize, like you see these individual objects in different trays. Gemma, I think, was talking about that, the pizza as being, did she say snake scales? Snake scales, I think she was saying. Anyways, you can keep going.
So beautiful.
So this, I think, is a great example of what I often like to talk about is prescriptive thinking. You see, I sit down and I'm trying to get a bunch of things done. And the exercise was, listen, girls, we have a bunch of whiteboard markers. Some of these work, some of these don't. Go for it. But being the good dad I am, I started by making sure I wrote the alphabet at the very top of the page, right? And I love what they did with this. There's a little bit of exploration of the marks, and then they just kind of go off on their own world. And it was such a good example of me to remember, they didn't need my alphabet there. In fact, they just needed that empty space, and they were free and available to go.
You call these collages, right? Because they're collaborations?
They're definitely collaborations. I mean, they both go over different, I mean, they have no problem going over areas that the other one's gone over. So it's very much a collaborative endeavor. They were thrilled with this. They were really having fun. So this sort of thing, I guess what I'd like to talk about here is just that I mean, I find it fascinating to watch what they do, but what's more interesting to me is when I put this up on a wall to take pictures of it. That documentation aspect fascinates them endlessly, right? Much like Lella talking about the students feeling observed and adding sort of that extra, saying, oh, I'll go for it. Yeah, this is, they do as well. They watched me putting all these and wrestling with all these up on the wall to try to take good shots of it. And they're all just sitting there. And then they went off and started drawing more. So that snowball effect, generative of me taking their work seriously and them taking it even more seriously.
Maybe we'll just go through the images one more time, so
Sure.
we can reflect on the home studio. So
Oh, fantastical.
I know, just endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, they do love it. So it's just to say, and this is in no way to say, oh, I got it figured out. Every day is really an adventure trying to suss out what is fascinating to them and enhance it while trying to manage my own life, right? And that's hard. And that's again where I would like help. If I'm in a context where I have these incredible teachers and they feed me some simple exercises that I can get on board with, right? I would actually love that. It's so stimulating. So just just a perspective of a parent, right? Who's in this, and also thinking about all these things. I still would love an atelierista who could come to me. So we want your help as parents, right? You help us contextualize what is so complicated to figure out. Yeah.
I keep going back to Leila's making space, you
Yeah.
know, making space, visible listening, just the need for that. And so often as parents, we think we're teachers that we have to fill that space,
Absolutely.
but children can fill that space.
Absolutely.
So I'm gonna talk a bit, just a couple slides about my own context. So I have now, he's 14. Enzo, my son is Enzo. And I kind of, I want to talk a little bit about just in my own research. I've been fascinated by Lella, your research for, I think we met in 2003. And, you know, that was before my son was born, and just thinking about the implications of like all of this work in the context of design, which I see it very much in design. I want to talk about, I've been teaching at Lesley, you know, 20 years, but I've been teaching in the classroom. I mean, I've been doing design. I've spent my whole life in design school, and really I've been giving a lot of thought recently to this notion of patterning versus designing. What does it mean to design? And doing a fair amount of like investigation of Leila's work in the context of other approaches and constructions of design education, particularly in North America. The implications in elementary, early childhood, elementary, secondary, really a intergenerational approach to thinking about the differences between vocational training, you know, spiritual training. I think, you know, my own, so this is just some different approaches. And I know we have some folks in the room who have followed the Froebel, have looked at Froebel, and we've looked at in the early industrial, you know, especially in the industrial education in the United States, the kindergarten movement, that was really a balance between, you know, I think I've been reading a fascinating book on the transatlantic kindergarten, looking at a lot of the women who brought the Froebel approach to the States. And there's lots to say here, but I think what's most fascinating right now is this relationship between, you know, perhaps industrial education, or what's the purpose of the education when children are learning in this way, like what is the end game? What is the end goal? And then that backing up against, you know, the industrial drawing methods of Walter Smith, who was, you know, this is the colonists coming into the United States teaching about, you know, this was art for industry, kind of going back even to the silk mills in Northampton and Florence, and these, you know, what's the purpose of learning these different skills and ideas. And Rhoda Kellogg, who was, you know, I know Lella, you've been influenced in your work, but also I think there's a real distinction looking at Rhoda Kellogg's work, who in the 60s, 70s, and 80s studied millions of children's drawings, and noticed that children draw the same things at the same ages, which also I understand was a philosophy of Arno Stern, who you were influenced through, and who was working in Paris, also fascinating. We could spend lots of time talking about, but this was more of a general theory that looked at sort of the patterns that connected children all over the world, independent of their cultural background, socioeconomic background. And so this was significant for me in my early understandings of design educational research. But then really, and then over here on the right is my own education was based in the international typographic style, which was this very Eurocentric perspective. I'll come back to this slide, but this was me in sophomore year drawing, looking very miserable, you know, doing what I was told was we were not to adopt a style in design school, that this was about eye training, and it was about connecting inwards. But actually now, particularly after COVID and the murder of George Floyd, and I'm just looking really at this stuff from a very different perspective, and also from decolonizing this work, really noticing that this was a style, that this was a lot of gatekeeping in my own design education, which makes me appreciate Leila's attention to really that deep listening of what makes each child distinct in their own search for in their marks, and what we can recognize in adulthood, which is why I think we're really interested in like talking to the parents of the
Yeah.
children from Fort Hill
This
to
would be
understand what relevance
print-
this has.
printed
Yeah.
paper. This
Yeah.
should be-
Because I understand that many of these children have very fascinating careers now. They're scientists and psychologists and thinkers, and it's just fascinating to look backwards now. But what I've come to realize, and children's drawings have always been influenced in the graphic design education for me, because this is about graphical expression, or it's about mark making. That's really a different kind of activity, I think, than art. But again, that could be debated. We could talk about that for ages. Rhoda Kellogg, I studied out of my college thesis, and she describes the child as designer phase, which is ages 3 to 5, when children discover shape and outline. And I think this is really what distinguishes patterning. Perhaps what was happening here with Walter Smith, this was more about patterning, pattern drawing for like textiles and industry, versus the individual child who is constructing meaning through letters and shapes and forms. And in my own child's life, Enzo went to an Reggio inspired school in Cranston, Rhode Island. And I'm just reflecting now on he's been in public school since first grade, but when I was working at the school and as a consultant, and we were looking with the curriculum directors on, how do we tie standards to the activities that children are doing in the classroom, which was very much an emergent curriculum of spontaneous, but really, constructed environments, but where the environment was the third teacher. And Enzo was very interested in building and constructing, and he was building, this is very much Rhoda Kellogg. He's a designer. He was designing his own stories, his own theories. Yeah. He didn't do a lot of drawing when he was younger, and I was always worried about that, because I was like, why isn't my son drawing? But the teacher said to me, they saw him more as a scientist. My father was an engineer. This is my father's optical prism, but and his grandpa is an engineer also, and my husband is an architect and photographer, and so it's just interesting now as a parent of almost high schooler to like look back. And one of the reflections that I've had, this is just really a metaphor for school, is that when from ages 1.5 to kindergarten, I have binders of this kind of documentation that chronicles his life in pictures and in action. From first grade and now until 8th grade, I have boxes and boxes of worksheets.
Wow.
There are no pictures of him. It's all machine learning and all, especially he was remote for the past year, and there's no visible record of like what he did in terms of projects. And it just really poses the question, why document? What documenting for assessment? I feel like I can learn a lot more about my child's schooling from this kind of documentation, or this, storytelling through the drawings than, so it just opens a lots of questions. I noticed we're almost at 11. We're hoping that we can have some looking together and reflections. And I also will follow up with some of the sources. So these are the 2 articles that Peter Pufall wrote out of Lella's work that were published in 1997 and 2000. So there's a couple sources here that so you can learn from Peter's perspective what you were doing during that time.
Need a printout.
You will have, yes, we have printouts, so we'll get those. But anyway, but I think right now, maybe we want to take just a few minutes break, come back at 11, and then we'll discuss, hopefully come back to the mural, and then we want to open the floor to all of you to have a dialogue for the next hour, and then end at 12. So I'm going to stop sharing here. And also, if anyone has not been able to get into the mural, send me a private message now in the next couple minutes, and I'll try to we'll try to work that out. we found that it worked. If you're not in the mural, to send me your individual email address and I can push you in there. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna come back at 11. And Layla, I don't know if you need a little break here, a few minutes, or and we'll come back. And then we'll have
Yes,
a
thank
final
you.
hour.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. So
You
we'll
guys
see you
have a
at,
little
we'll come back at 11, but stay on the screen and we'll come back to you in a moment. Okay, so we're gonna come back. We're coming back and Leila's coming back. And thanks to everybody for making comments. Feel free to, I can save the chat and I can send these notes if folks want to reflect in the chat, in the mural. Here, Leila, we're ready.
What is going to happen now?
We're going to reflect, so you come back.
Con qualche domande anche. We'll have some Q&A, così we can experience. See that from our lovely audience. Here, let's get you. Is it about here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so we can turn to the mural or we can just have an open discussion. So if folks want to jump in and just, we don't have to be very formal. More of a critique, maybe.
Yeah.
I know we've talked a lot and there are a lot of different things, but we also have, some of you have made a few murals with some questions even right in there. You know,
Yes.
it's also-
I can share the screen. I can share murals. We can talk about.
But if anyone does want to come in right now, you're welcome to offer questions.
Do you want people to raise their hand for questions or put them in the chat?
So I think we can just, it can be very open and, you know, people can jump in and we can just learn to negotiate the space a little bit. If it gets a little unwieldy, we can, I think we're okay. Folks. And feel free to turn your camera on if you feel comfortable to do so.
Heather?
Yes, or Garista?
Ah, Krista.
Yes, hi, buongiorno. So my name is Gary Spell and I am very excited to be here because I am actually trying to create a home studio too. I speak Spanish at home. Le llamo taller de arte. I do have two boys. One is 4 and another boy is 1. So I don't have a question right now in my mind, but I just want to let you know that I'm super excited. James, thank you so much because I connected with all of you, especially with James because I'm also at home trying to create a taller de arte at home.
So she has a question.
No, she's just sharing with us what's going on with her too as well. Yeah,
Oh,
I feel you.
love
It is.
that.
Oh, good, please.
Yes, I like the idea very much.
I would love to share with you. I have some photos if you want to see.
Yeah.
I know other people
Oh.
have questions.
If you'd like to post.
I don't know how to use. I don't know how to use murals. So I did is I just created. I just put like some photos together in a PowerPoint.
You want to share your screen? Would you like to share your screen? Or
Sure. Can I? Yeah.
I think so. Marianne, is it possible?
Yep, it should be fine. You should be able to jump right in and share it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, if you'd like to
Sure,
share.
I can do that. Okay. I'm going to take a risk. So, taller de arte en casa, and I'll be quick because I know people.
En casa, bello.
So I'm also in Massachusetts. And
Che gioia.
say that again.
Que joya, she said, what a joy.
Oh, sí, sí, sí. So this is a little corner.
It's a beautiful space and very inviting.
Thank you, thank you. So this is a corner. I actually have different corners in my house. So this is the art studio, taller de arte. What I did is everything is very low. So the table is very low. So they're able to, even my 1-year-old, he's able to push the chair out and he walks and he sits on the chair and now he can get the materials. The crayons are right here. So he pulls them out and he brings it to the table. The paintbrushes are more for my 4-year-old, although now Tomas, the baby 1-year-old, he wants to reach, he can reach, but we do a lot more finger paint with my 1-year-old. But there's a lot of art everywhere in my house. This is them working. We actually, for Father's Day, I found this is actually mold cutters for cookies, to make cookies. But I said, oh, Joseph is very interested in letters, and we wrote the word dad in English. My husband is American, so we also speak English at home. And he was so proud. I was so proud of me too, because I usually go and buy a present and like, but we decided to create something. And yeah, they were very proud of creating that for sorry, for daddy. This is Joseph. He's in the art studio. This is the table that I showed earlier. He's really he's working on a train. He loves trains, and he said he wanted to make something big. And we started with one, but then he made a couple. These are actually, he's also learning, so thinking about the standards. I know that at this age they need to learn how to use scissors. So we actually do with pencil. He draws a line, and I call it a laberinto. So it's fun. It's like a laberinto, and then he has to use his scissors. He uses his left hand, and he went around, and he cut the circles. I did help him, not good, but he's using the tape, and yeah. Let me see. So this is him. Oop. See, that was him. That was actually not the final. There's another one. He's standing on the chair because it's so high. He said, Mommy, you need to see it all the way. So I need to stand on the chair.
So it's fantastic. And I wonder how many children can really enjoy and use this space.
So right now it's only my children, but I'm actually thinking about maybe having friends come over for free. I do believe in free education, that every child should do art free. And one thing I've learned is that there are many art studios here, but it's very expensive. So I'm thinking to do maybe something in the summer where friends of Joseph can come and explore.
I think it is a wonderful initiative, and it should be known more, because something that is so supportive of the children. How, maybe the only question would be, how could you respond if you have many people who would want you to do that? Would they offer a space, a public space, or a space that you do not have to pay too much for, but really start almost an atelier for more children, because what you do is fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. You are an inspiration to me, and I love when I heard that you had your own art atelier in your home. So I'm like, oh, that's me. Thank you. Just to show you.
Fantastic.
Thank you. This is he wanted. So I use a lot of recycle. I don't put everything in. I recycle a lot.
Yeah.
So this is him.
I would like for you to send me your address so that
Oh,
we can continue to correspond.
You were in Western Mass also?
I'm in Massachusetts, in Boston.
Oh, in Boston. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
So close. Yeah.
Very nice.
Very close. And and this is just one more thing I wanted to share. So one thing that I'm doing, and I learned as a teacher, is in Massachusetts, is that the children can paint. We've done the beautiful stuff at school. So I'm also a teacher, right? So I guess this year I'm not working. So this year I'm home with the boys. But one thing that I'm doing with Joseph is, after he paints, I don't know if this is wrong, but I ask him, tell me more about your painting. And it's fascinating because he's bilingual. So I write what he says, and he said, una máquina que disappear todas las cosas.
Oh, wow.
So it's fascinating to me that he's also, I'm also learning how he's bilingual, his communication is developing and how he's learning two languages at the same time, and how his grammar is developing. It says in English, I can translate, it's a machine that makes disappear all the things. So this is, I'm also a reading teacher, so I love the development, of reading and language. This one, it says, el rocket ship is going to el espacio.
Mhm.
And I know many years ago, we used to say that, you only have to speak English or you only have to speak Spanish. But now we're learning that our children and our students are simultaneous bilingual. So they're listening to both languages at the same time. And it's our job as teachers to then help them process that and help them how I can use what I know in Spanish to then communicate efficiently in my second language or first language, English.
Gabriel, have you encountered third culture kids, the
No,
concept? I highly recommend looking
I'm
into
gonna
this.
write it down.
Adult third culture kids specifically relate to the adults. Third culture kids relate to the student. I think it was 2 psychologists in the 80s who did the bulk of the research. It's fascinating, and it involves much of the common experience that people who are from one culture or multiple cultures but grow up in another culture, things that relate. And this actually is a very salient discussion because Lella is also a third culture kid. I grew up bilingual, French and English, a lot of countries. Lella also was a third culture kid, not in as dramatic a sense perhaps, but because Lella grew up with her father working in Italcementi. He was the cement director, moving around to different parts of Italy.
Yeah.
So especially in a country like Italy, where regional differences, it's like being in different countries when you're 100 miles away.
Yeah.
That involved a lot of transition.
Another dialect each
Yes.
time. Yeah.
Literally, the language is different, the cultures are different, and you are an outsider.
Yeah.
And you lived in Ethiopia when you were
Yeah.
3.
That's right.
When you were 3, you lived in
Yeah.
Africa. Yeah.
And so part of, I would argue, and if this research backs this up in many ways, part of the skills that Lella uses in integrating herself into these environments involve very much the skill set that she picked up from that sort of dynamic upbringing.
Yeah.
So it's, again, just sort of the idea of using what you have and making it work, right? And I think what you're saying is huge. The grammatical differences, the cultural relativity of understanding one culture does it this way, the other one does it that way. Neither of them is wrong.
But
They're
also,
just different.
But also one of the aspects of graphic design education is this notion of simultaneous, what you're bringing up, Gabriel, is the simultaneous learning, texts, sounds,
Images.
the images, that that's all a simultaneous learning, that we often in schools put these in boxes, but you are listening about through those multiple languages. And what I love about graphic design is that it allows the communicator to be able to think and process and communicate in multiple languages.
Yeah.
So like in my, learning about designing a poster was a revelation, because it was like, oh, I can bring my senses and bring typography and bring all these different aspects into one form. And that, so I think that's where I think there's a lot of potential to look in, well, particularly in my setting of higher education, and look at the implications of that education, not only for commercial pursuits, but also, or vocational, it's more about a learning process. So fantastic. Yes, Kathleen. Thank you so much, Garisbel. Thank you for sharing. That was beautiful.
No problem. Thank you.
Yes, it was beautiful to see your desire to take care of your children and inspire them, and which is what really, Leila, you have been doing your whole life. And I had the privilege of being at some of your workshops and beautiful presentations back in like 2010, 2011, in that area. No, 2001, when I was at school at Lesley University. And I had the pleasure of meeting you I worked with Mary Mendez and Marta Gredler and all the beautiful people at Leslie. And you taught everyone in your, as James said, your unassuming way to listen to people, to listen to children, to respect the parent as part of the collaboration, to be open, to let them have their way, which I think is the natural inclination of our hearts, is we want our way. So to let children have it their way is a purposeful, difficult decision that, as James was saying, takes enormous patience. And I just want to thank you, Layla, for the beauty that you have just been passing around the whole world. All the different countries that you have influenced, all the children, all the families. And I worked with family childcare. So my particular love is working with families closely. And I did early intervention after I graduated from Leslie. I brought your beautiful love of children to allow them to have their joy and us to not define what their joy should be.
Yeah.
I brought that into early intervention and working with families, and right now I'm retired, and I'm actually thinking, because of the Zoom, this is exploding our ability to work with people throughout the earth, throughout our country, our communities. Zoom is free,
Yeah.
and we have our little studios all over the place with people who love children. And even just the people right now could create an entire system for all the different places and the children that could be a part. So Layla, thank you so much. I could never, ever thank you for the beauty you've given me. I've tried to pass on to my children, my own children, and the children I've worked with. So thank you, Layla, from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, and all of you here.
You know, sounds like
Other-
some from here. It seems like
Yeah,
people
there's
are
so
putting
many
in a
nice,
lot of
beautiful
questions.
ideas
Yeah.
in the chat. I mean, if anyone would like to read some of the reflections that you've put in the chat, or we can go to the mural, whatever folks like to do. We have until noon to delve into topics more deeply. Oh,
Oh, it's
Bridget,
like
go ahead.
Angelica.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, so great to see you. This has been, just very inspiring, and totally just introduce myself. I am an Italiarista, inspired by Reggio Emilia in New York City. And I've been working a long time to, to bring what we know to children and adults alike. And one of the things that, I raised 4 children myself, and they're all older, and I can't believe Enzo is going into high school. But, I think thinking about, I've been doing a lot of work recently with colleagues who are very proactive in self-directed education and democratic schools, and introducing many to the principles that we're talking about here, and also bringing their focus to early childhood. And I think that one of the things I'd like to know about in terms of, because definitely home studios and facilitating and supporting how that can happen, and how homes can support young children in developing, is such a huge void, I feel like. And I think one of the things that gets misinterpreted is, or misunderstood, or maybe we're just so excited about what we can offer children that we often interfere, is how young children are capable of finding their own path to figure something out. And so how autonomous are these studios for children, and how much understanding of young children as self-directed learners can we, disseminate for, information for people who have no idea of what we're talking about, but have children in their homes, so that they understand the value of that space and of that time. Because even, the youngest of children won't enter the space, and I'm talking metaphorically here, if we're too noisy, you know, and we have to be patient with the silence in order for them to show us what it is that they, you know, are thinking about or want to, you know, when they feel that they have some power in the dialogue. And I just wanted to share a story that illustrates that of and I'm thinking about my 3-year-old self, which, you know, was digging in the dirt and banging on things and under people's feet all the time. But I remember my 3-year-old, my youngest of 4, so he had a lot of experiences with other children. And he went along with me everywhere. And he was 3, and we went on a school trip with his sister, who was in the 1st grade. And we went down to the Brooklyn Museum. And one thing to note is that my children always knew that there was a little sketchbook in my bag for them. I wasn't always giving it to them or telling them to use it. I introduced it, but they knew it was there. So at 3, he walked around watching the 6-year-olds were all sitting with their clipboards and their worksheets and also their notebooks to draw in, and they were drawing the Brooklyn Bridge. And I let him move along. He just did his thing, and he walked and just kept plopping him down next to a couple of favorite kids. You know, first his sister, watched what she was doing, then another child, then another child, then another child, and then came over to me and said, "Where's my book? You know, can I have my book? I need a pencil." And I gave him his little sketchbooks like this big. And I was just looking for it. I'll put it on my mural page to share it. But it is an exquisite little rendering that's only 2 inches high of the Brooklyn Bridge. And he learned, and it's recognizable. And he did that because he had, you know, like Loris Malaguzzi talks about, all those little tools in his pocket. And he knew from hanging out with older kids that he could learn something from them, or maybe they would, you know, inspire him to something or whatever. But so I just think that the value of understanding how competent children are is really, really important in supporting this development of home studios and, you know, the 100 languages as we know them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you, Bridget. Just a quick thought is that you're so on it. And I think part of the big challenge that still exists and makes Reggio so interesting as work right now is the translation of not the literal words, but the underpinnings of the cultures of Reggio, these little elements that do exactly what you're talking about. Reggio is such a beautiful foreign system to Americans often that it's hard to pull out the elements. It just looks like this. I find a lot of people that think it's so holistic and wonderful, and Italians are just perfect, and what can we do, you know?
Yeah.
But it's not. There's so much there, and so much of it is small, and a lot of what you're talking about. So I think what you're saying is so key, and that is the work right now. How do we also translate the cultural context? Because the Italian cultural context is very different. And to understand it in America, we have to acknowledge those differences and observe them, right? So 100%. That's awesome. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Grazie.
Was it Angelica? Someone had, or who was speaking?
Someone else had a hand up right before Bridget? No.
No.
There's Kathleen.
Kathleen, go ahead.
Kathleen.
Oh, you're on.
Not to double dip, but I just wanted to say how much Bridget made such beautiful sense. And I loved and would like to see that picture of the Brooklyn Bridge. I love that she let him just take his own time and as and also your reference to the 100 languages, which I'm sure Layla knows by heart. Excuse me, but the 100 languages, because children know, they know 100 languages. We just don't. We need to learn that they know that.
Yeah.
Hi.
To give them the possibility to show that they know without really interfering in the way they want to show that. And So the more occasions for them to explore material, explore situations that are attractive to them, it is really the way, indirect way to ask their response to our request.
Yeah, one thing documentation has done for me as an individual is, especially in taking videos and photos of my experiences with my children, it lets me, after the fact, make sense of something that I didn't make sense of in the moment, right? The things I miss constantly with my kids.
Constantly.
And that then I can look at this video, and especially when I'm in the mode of more passive observation, I have a lot more patience. When I'm observing them with my camera, I will let them go much further into what might be, oh wait, I should come in and intervene. This is my time to intervene. I can stay back a lot better. And again, forensically, to look at it later, all of a sudden I'm like, you missed that. All these things happened, and that's okay, because now I've integrated that into my mind, right? But if I let that go without any documentation and couldn't observe that, I would rewrite that, like we all do with experiences. Oh, it was fine, and it was good, it's good, let's keep moving, right? So that sort of pause, again, documentation, I think, helps us do what you're talking about exactly, because you can take it out of your brain. You say, I'm going to be here, and I know that later on I can figure out what happened.
Even if it's 30 years later.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know, how old, Bridget, was it Marcello? Was it, who was the Brooklyn Bridge drawing? Was
That was Valentino.
Valentino, so how old is he now?
He's going to be a senior in college. He's 21.
Right, right. So just thinking about the power of that, for you to think about that little drawing and have evidence of that drawing now, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, right in this project, right? We're looking at Lella's work from so long ago and finding helpful conclusions and analyses from this. Like, it kind of blows my mind. Like, with the tools that we have in this room right now, all of the phones, all of the audio recording, the infinite possible, like what can we do for 20 years from now? It's just so inspiring to see the tools. We went to the moon with less than a cell phone worth of technology, right? So you watch Lella do what she did all alone. Sure, she was Lella. She was already Lella. But here's a thesis student in a new culture trying to figure out how to make sense of it. And sort of that bravery and there's a lot of inspiration there, and largely because they're so basic, and she got so much out of that.
Yeah. And also I found the right people who were patient.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Yeah.
Heather, were you trying to say something?
I think Kay had something too.
Hi.
Heather.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Heather. Nice to see
Hi. How are you?
you.
I was just, after Bridget was speaking and talking about the modeling of the older children with her younger, I had this year worked with a group of 2-year-olds that had never been in a school experience before. So I guess for me professionally, I was struggling with a little of how much modeling when you don't have that multi-age group there. I know how much enrichment that provides them. And just, I guess I don't know that I have an answer, an exact question. I guess that's something, I feel like I'm struggling with professionally now, knowing, I guess they have that modeling with each other. But also, just hearing Bridget's story, how enriching it is to have that modeling from multi-ages as well.
Are you working in a school, Heather, or at home?
I'm working at the Shed Children's Campus in Andover.
Okay.
Which I think I used to work at Leslie when I worked there. I think Linda actually Schultz-Bouchard was one of the presenters, and she's the executive director there. So I have 3 children now, and one attended last year. I now have another attending there, and they knew I had some knowledge of the Reggio Emilia, and when schools went to remote, called and asked me if I'd be interested in helping out. So it's been a wonderful year of learning for me, and sort of trying to figure out where my path will lead. I'm not sure, but knowing my passion is with these young children. But again, just the level of modeling and being with a group that's never been exposed to a school experience before. So it's just been interesting learning for me.
Mm.
Not that I have a question again, but it's more just, you know, my own current experience. And
The experience is hugely relevant to so many people so many people are going through this with COVID, and you know there is this moment. So that I think that's a hugely relevant question. There are a lot of people asking that. Yeah.
Can I respond to Heather?
Yeah.
About modeling, just because I think that one of the things that we do as adults is we feel like we have to fill in a gap with modeling, and we don't always have to fill in those gaps. So I feel very strongly that we need to afford ourselves the time and the patience to give the child, even if it's one child in a singular alone experience, to create their own model, because that's how they develop their competence. So as soon as we model, we're imposing an adult interpretation. So that's a really tricky place to be. And it really has to be in a situation that is reciprocal in relationship with the child or children. If they're asking to see something, or how can you give it back to them? But I just think your question is a really good example of how we as adults try to find solutions to things before we give the child the time to show us their solution.
I wonder if the expression modeling is the one that we want to use, rather than working side by side and posing questions as we proceed. If we can realize that the children also have questions, we have questions, because we have not done always exactly the same exploration of material. So then it is as if we were asking questions to the material in a way to say, oh, this I could fold. No. This material is too hard. If I try to fold it will break. I'm just saying something abstract at this moment, but it is really the material itself that I'm handling is posing questions. And if those questions were formulated also with the children or young people who want to explore, then there would be a very more dynamic way of working and more ways of discovering possibility, and document that. I was trying to fold something that was much too hard, and I created a crease in the paper or in the quality of the material I was using, that really created a channel where the paint was able to pass through. I'm not, this didn't really happen, but I'm inventing the possibility to really open up more the exploration of with materials and document that.
I think part of the deceptive simplicity of what she's talking about is, again, presence, right? Because she's asking a question about what is happening right now. It's not what should we do, how should we do? It's, hey, what are you doing? What's that? And now we can all focus on that. It's very, I mean, children are so present, right? We can focus on that, and now they can all interrelate around that. Versus if I'm keeping a superstructure in my head of how I want to do this, what am I trying to achieve here, right? I get into trouble, because if my actual environment is not yielding an effective solution for that idea, I'm stuck.
Right.
But if I'm aware and I'm saying this, what is happening right now? Oh, you're doing that. Right. Now we can create a dialogue right around what's happening, and they'll all feed into it because they're all present.
And that's really the distinction between designing and patterning. I think patterns are just patterns. They're things that exist in the world, versus designing is really about unique construction.
So
it's
that
around
is depending on who is doing
who's doing that, designing,
yeah.
who's designing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that in fact requires much more action and documentation of action exploration. and learn from that, not to apply it as you see it being done, but to really include your own inventions to solve differently the problem.
And the adults living with the uncertainty of knowing the outcome is a challenge. I think it's such a challenge at every age, every context in school, I think, and for parenting. And I mean, my 14-year-old now, he's like, Mom, don't take pictures of me. I told you about, like, when he was little, I could document. And now it's like, Mom, why do you have to put on everything on Instagram? And Mom, like, why you, why do you have to, just like let yourself be? Why are you so, he's teaching me like how to, but he pulls from Reggio Emilia, his experiences, because he would say, even today, he'll say, like, he'll build a Lego kit or do something. He's like, Mom, we can take it down because I can take a picture of it. I can take a picture of my good work and we don't have to. So he still refers to that. And he said to me recently, which was really touching, because he's been in public school. He's going to the biggest public high school in Rhode Island now. And he said, Mom, my preschool was a really good school, wasn't it? He said, recognizing the quality of that education that I think was really about emergent curriculum, allowing his voice to be, and now he's in, he tests 30% of the time, and the tests aren't even for him, they're for the school. And so it's just a very, it's very interesting to watch my own child go through a process of recognizing good school. Like, what does good school, like, what does a good school look like? So yeah, Allison.
I think that the questions that come up now and the reflection that also follow those questions is what we were hoping for, but we were not imagining as fantastically productive and suggestive. So we really have to thank each one of you and for responding to this experiment of creating in a home a connection. I think that the tools that you brought, Christina, and you brought, Jane, all your experience with two twins. I mean, each one of us brought something that it has been unexpected about what it could have been. And I am really completely enchanted and grateful. So we have to have a second
session.
Yeah, well, we could be in a community of practice. That's the nice thing about Mural, is we can continue the conversations and we can talk about that. Yeah, thank you, Layla. And I think Allison has had your hand up.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to touch on that last point, which was one of the challenges of the home studio, I think, is that if you're in a bigger school context with a bunch of amazing atelieristas, you can discuss and rely on them, the support of figuring out how to do that, how to discuss the things. One of the challenges of the home studio is you might be alone, right? So making sense of all of that material you're collecting, sharing it. There's a West African concept called Ubuntu. The notion is that you can only experience your humanity if it's reflected back to you, right? You can't experience your humanity alone. It's just not possible. But when someone else experiences that and is open to that, you feel it right back, right? And so as educators, the support network is so key there too. And perhaps that's an opportunity where Zoom offers us possibilities. A context like this, where all these different home studios can share, can discuss, can do a bit of that documentation that normally happens, that typically happens collaboratively with the teachers, right? That's something we have to sort of adjust. That intelligence of the adults that keeps feeding into itself is key to, because otherwise you're so alone
so
trying to decipher.
Space too. There's so many cultural perspectives that
once again, the intelligence rises when you open it up to the community, right?
And the digital means is opening up for us for the first time, so many of you. So it is a fantastic, and I hope with the goodwill of the two of you, that this can be continued, and all of you. Mhm.
Yes, Allison.
That was an incredible exchange that just happened. And it just occurred to me that, like, I mean, parents can be supported in this Zoom platform who are working alone all over the world in their homes. If they need to be, their ideas to be reflected, and they need a community, like, there's so much potential in this kind of a platform for them. So that's a pretty powerful idea. I wanted to go back to what just the idea of presence, and just share an experience that really, it just surprised me enormously, because I was a musical specialist for the pods that sprung up in Washington, where I'm from. And I was just amazed when I brought my understanding of presence to these classes on my computer. Like, when I came to a music class where there was an overall plan, but I just really approached it listening to where the children were at when they came to me. And each time I found myself saying, you know what, I'm going to go in this way, because this child is very focused on the cicadas, and they look a little bit like they need to move rather than hold the instruments now. So each week the class became this organic response to these children. And by the end of this time on our computer, which was 25 minutes, the connection that was possible to create when I approached the lesson with this very deep sense of presence was amazing to me. And so I just wanted to share, it's a different context. It's a musical context, it's music and movement, and it was a virtual connection that was a very, very powerful experience. So thank you. And thank you for making this morning possible. It's really an honor to be able to be together with all of you and with Lella.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Karen. Karen?
Here she go.
Where'd you go? She just...
Here we go.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, sorry. I think I was off with somebody's socks in the dryer that could disappear. There's so much from this morning's session that I'll be able to sit with for days to come. It's been a beautiful opportunity. And just thinking about Lella's approach to her research, and how, as you said, now it could be 30 years later, we're able to have conversation about this because it was documented so beautifully in such an interesting way. And I think the other thing about it, and it's been, I think, touched on, the children also, if the documentation is given to them, they can revisit their younger self. And what a powerful impact. I mean, we all have photos from our childhood. Most of us do anyway, but it's usually, standing in front of the Christmas tree or blowing out the candles at the birthday party, or, a vacation photo. Not that essential photo of the way you were thinking at a point in time, at how your essence, someone was there with you, listening with empathy. I can't imagine the power of that. I haven't had that experience from my own childhood, and most of us probably haven't. But this is the legacy that I think this approach to pedagogy gives this to children. So if I can share my screen, I'll just show 2 photos. Is that possible?
Should be
Yes.
doable.
Okay. Are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay, so I coordinated a project. I'm from Hamilton, Ontario. I coordinated a project for 15 years called Artists at the Center that brought artists into early education programs in our city that were exploring the Reggio approach. So this is a photo of just one of the projects that happened with one individual child who had come with his family from Central America, so was learning English, and he had a deep interest in architecture. And Bridget's story of the Brooklyn Bridge reminded me of this, because this little boy came in one day with a book from the library he had gotten with his mom. It was an adult book with photos of buildings from around the world. And he flipped through the pages and stopped at a page that showed St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. And he said to the artist in that room, whose name was also Jason, this little boy's name was Jason too, "That's what I want to make." And he worked on this on and off for a year. It has working lights inside. There's a stained glass window. It was just absolutely fabulous. And decided at the end of it, he and his family said, "Keep it here. You know, it will do more good here than it will at home." This little boy, you can see there's a photo there beside the 3D model that he'd made of a drawing he did when he came back 4 years later on a PA day from school. Came back, saw that his cathedral was still there in the room, and he drew a picture of it. And he wrote underneath, "Jason was here, the one who built this." So then his drawing was put up alongside the 3D model, along with a little photo of him at the age when he made the 3D model. And then when we were wrapping up our project, and it would have been about 10 years later after this had finished, we had a big retrospective. We had an annual exhibit, but we had a big retrospective exhibit. We got in touch with as many families as we could to come, because we were showing the documentation and the children's work. And so it was in a big space, a big open space with all of this documentation. And I looked over where the cathedral was, and I saw this lanky young fellow looking closely. And I went over and I said, "Jason," and he looked up. And I mean, I could feel tears. He was revisiting his younger self. And so he's looking at the documentation. So I said, "You know, you must be in high school now. Do you have a sense of what you may be interested in pursuing?" And he said, "Well, you know, I was thinking construction." And then he looked back over his shoulder at the documentation. He said, "Yeah, maybe architecture."
Wow.
It was so powerful. And so that, again, the careful attention that's paid the children, that sense that someone really listened, and that opportunity. And it showed me also, children, I think, know themselves so much better than we ever give them credit for. At that young age, that interest in construction was still there for him so many years later. And I don't know that we often listen carefully enough when children are showing us and telling us that. So all of this, I have to say, is a gift because of Lella and the colleagues in Reggio Emilia. It changed my life. It's changed what's happened in our city. And we have so much to be grateful for.
Thank you. And you have a book also, Karen. Maybe put the title of your book with Lella in the chat, so if folks want to follow up with the research they can.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that story is in the book, the story of the...
Oh, the story's in the book. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Angelica.
I don't even know how to continue. After this story, I'm crying, and it was so beautiful. I just wanted to share that I also had a studio during the pandemic in my backyard, and we had kindergartners and third graders because my kids are in this grade. And it was such a joy. And I actually got to understand what it is to be inspired by Reggio through this year, because I had this time to spend with them, and it was like the most beautiful, and that I could learn so much with my kids. And I wish I had pictures and everything, but I don't have anything to share. But the most beautiful thing is that they asked me, can we continue even though there is no pandemic? So now I say, yeah, I can go on until like you decide not to want me anymore. Which comes to my mind what Christina was saying that about your son, what a beautiful preschool, right? Like he went through and now he's in this place where he's being tested, and how important it is of us parents, you know, like to know that unfortunately, private schools are so expensive and so sometimes, right? Like it just, we wish we could, you know, have the choice, but sometimes we don't, and we have the public system that is so cemented with this idea that, you know, they have this traditional idea, and how important it is of us parents to be on the side and giving this opportunities for them to continue their more progressive way of living. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the structures were built for public schooling on industrial models, and we have to, I think a lot of what I'm thinking about recently, I'm working on a project in Rhode Island called Reciprocity. It's a national project, and it's really about building new learning architecture, dismantling a lot of these industrial models, you know, and it's really, it's not about the teachers doing great work. It's more about the structures that hold up those or restrict the teachers from doing the kind of work that they need to do. And with a lot of reliance on machine learning and remote learning, I don't know, there's some barriers, but there's also so many holes of opportunity that we can consider when building, you know, schools. But I'm working in communities in Rhode Island with unbelievable practitioners from therapeutic settings and artists and designers. It's called Reciprocity Rhode Island if you want to look at the larger construct, but really just listening to communities, listening to youth voice and thinking about what does it mean to build new schools. It's very exciting, but it's also very scary too, because I think a lot of the structures need to be dismantled in order for us to understand how to create schools where adults are, you know, taking a step back. We are so involved, and it's just, I don't know, it's a lot for the adult education piece, but anyway, I won't go with that. We have we have a few more minutes. Kathleen, do you want to?
I'm so sorry to just throw in one more thing based on what you said, Angelica, is that, you know, one of the things we've talked about today is how this medium provides it's just a different opportunity for connection. You know, so much, you go on YouTube today and you have so many people who get so specific into something they're very passionate about and share extremely narrowly, right? As opposed to sort of a more generalist approach. I know, you know,
Yeah.
and that in the internet gives us really great insight. You know, as we talk about, you know, Gabriel's talking about creating an opportunity to provide free art, right? Free art education. That grassroots level, all of a sudden she's got a few people in her community who can now engage with some of these concepts. Is it the entire Reggio Emilia academic approach and you sit and wonder? No, it's not. But some of those aspects can come through. It's a seed, right? Communication like this. If there's more decentralized exploration of these concepts taken out of the traditional educational context, I'm not saying that we shouldn't keep working on inside the system, right? We have to, but there are these opportunities that will pop up.
Yeah.
What can all of you, out of this, the person who you found the most interesting in here, what happens if you connect with them and you start a little Zoom? What, you know, there is just this possibility to expand and share this knowledge, because you all, I mean, so many of you have spoken with all these different pockets of Reggio Emilia understanding. So I think this is it. On some level, we keep doing this.
Yeah.
We find new ways.
But I'd also like to say, and one thing I want to echo about today is I think one of the intentions of this course in the spirit of the home studio is also to recognize, I mean, we many of us know Lella Gandini from the context of Reggio Emilia, but I think what we wanted to show too was Lella's experiences prior. I mean, this was going on in your work much before you met Loris Malaguzzi and worked in the home studio, and all the work that you are as a scholar and as a teacher. I mean, very much, you know.
Many people supporting and helping So really that's the secret. So all of us together, it's really that we can together continue to think and maybe connect in many different ways. So that is my wish and my really greeting for this day.
From your home, from this
my
Leila's
home.
house. Yeah.
From Lella's house. Okay. And you have been very, very welcome, and your word will remain, because this is a document that we have produced all together.
Yeah, we've recorded this session too,
Right.
so we can revisit and we can send that. Marianne, I don't know, follow up, and I know Kathleen, you had some remarks, but I'm wondering, Marianne, can you think of like just next steps? We have about 5 minutes left in terms of, like, we can continue the mural, we can continue to discuss possibilities of continuing the conversation. What are your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things. One is there, as you all probably know, because of the original invitation, that this was conceived as a longer experience, and we want to figure out a way to make that happen. And so I think it would be wonderful to get some just feedback about time and time and space, and how to kind of bring to bring more people not only into this kind of conversation, but to have a deeper experience. And so we're always looking at the center where I work at Lesley, Center for Advanced Professional Studies. We're always looking for feedback from educators and people who work with children and families about what can we bring to you, and how can we bring it to you in a way that is accessible both for you physically and financially, right? So just sort of like, I'd love to get some feedback from on that from people, and ideas, because we at the center also are trying to really, we want to collaborate with as many people as we can. I will say that there are some other, for people who are interested, there is this wonderful new Reggio inspired certificate program at Lesley, which can be taken both in live and online. It's called Innovations in Early Childhood. I just put a link to information about it in the chat. But that's another, and you can be for credit or for PDPs. That's another kind of way to grow practice, although it's not necessarily about this. It is very connected to this conversation, but it's sort of in a different context. And I also want to say, because I know I'm aware of time, that everyone who's on the call today, I'm going to send you a certificate of participation. So it'll help you, just sort of document that you were here during these 3 hours, if you need that for anything. And I grabbed a picture from the article and put it in, and so I'll send that to you. I don't know what we want to do with the recording, Christina.
Yeah.
Whether or not you want to, whether you want me to share that with the people who were on the call, or whether we want to use it in some other way.
Yeah, I mean, I think we hope to use it maybe to build and grow this work, whatever this work is, in terms of, I know that this program is somewhat, it's not directly related to a program at Lesley or a school. It's its own, it's its own thing. So we can follow up, but I think it would be good, Marianne, if you could send out maybe a follow-up and just get everyone's ideas about where this work could go, because I think we can certainly continue this community of practice. I can certainly look at the mural. Lella, James and I meet every Monday morning too. So we're continuing to grow. And as we said, we plan to continue this research, follow up with the families from Fort Hill. And so I think we have a plan to just continue conversations and building of the work.
Well, we would love your insight and thoughts, because this is also for us the first time to start sharing some of these things that we've been thinking about for a lot. So we're trying to translate some of these things in a way that's meaningful. Any experiences you have or thoughts would be very helpful.
Yeah. So you can put those in the chat too. I know some folks are putting in the chat, or if you, you can reach out to me directly. Marianne will do a follow-up. So there's multiple ways to follow up, and I will continue with the mural. I'll take a look at folks' stuff, and I wonder, maybe we're at noon, so I'm wondering, Kathleen, maybe you can put your thoughts in the chat. We can document that. I'll also collect the chat, and Marianne, we can send that out. I'm okay sending the recording to folks. I don't know how you feel, about it, or if we wanted to maybe, do you have thoughts about that from the center? From you're really helping with the administration of this.
No, we've been doing this for those of you who were on the innovations and early childhood sessions. I sent those recordings to the people who participated, just as a way. So, because again, it's a chance to go back, and as people have said so wonderfully, that there's a lot to process here. And so how great would it be to go back and hear exactly what Angelica said, or hear some more, look at that picture from Karen's story, like those kinds of things are really, or be able to connect and say, oh, I had this experience. I remember, let me find out who that woman's name was, because I don't remember, so I think I think we should do that. And James and Christina and Leila and I will think about some follow-up questions that might help guide this work. And so look for that from me, the recording, your certificate, and some kind of feedback questions that will help guide as we move forward.
Yeah, great. But we want to stay in touch, so don't be a stranger.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone, so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Yeah.
And Marianne, I'll save the chat too.
Oh, and I did too, but you go ahead.
You save it? Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. Well, you go ahead and save it also, Christina.
I'll save it so I have it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, you guys. This is
Thanks.
exactly the subject that's been on my mind for the past year.
So great to see you,
So many
Bridget.
thoughts, Bridget. Thank you.
So
That
great
was
to
really
see you.
helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So good to see you.
Gracias.
Grazie.
Bye.
Okay. Okay.
Bye. Take care, Dion.
Bye,
Bye.
Diaz. Thank you for coming, Diaz. Nice to see you as always.
Mhm.
Yeah. Beautiful to see you.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Bye,
Bye.
Diaz.
Take
So nice
care,
to
guys.
see you. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you for your story.
Oh, no problem.
So beautiful.
Anytime.
So beautiful. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Oh, we're good. We're good. Oh, we can leave? Yeah. Okay, we're gonna leave then. We're
Yeah.
gonna check
Bye,
out.
guys.
Okay, Christina, hold on a second. So let's just let's put together like a little feedback. If you shoot me some ideas, then let's go back and forth. But let's try to do it by the middle. Is it possible to try to do it by the middle of the week?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's follow up. And I really appreciate all your help with the
Thank you so
management.
much.
Thank you for staying on the call too.
Oh, it was lovely. It was
Just
lovely.
having a backup. It
Yeah.
was reassuring knowing you were
was.
there, because I was like, if there's any problems, like,
And there were, initially there were, so it was enormously
Yeah.
helpful. Thank
it's
you.
really helpful.
Good. All right. Thank you. It's lovely to see you all, and we'll process this week, and you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you
Thank
so
you, Marianne.
much. Thanks,
Take care.
Marianne. Okay,
Bye.
take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.